In this next part, we're going to take a look at using the Ken Burns effect. So let's take a look real quick on who Ken Burns is. Ken Burns is a documentary filmmaker who started making videos on historical things. He was really well known for the Civil War and then baseball. And so one of the things that he used was a lot of images. So when you're using images, you have to be a little bit more creative about the way that you actually use them as video. And so what he developed is an idea of just zooming into an image. Not really a completely unique idea that nobody had ever thought of, but he was one of the first people to use it as a storytelling device in images. I'm sorry, in films. So this is very typical. One of the things to be aware of with this one I don't really like is that you get to see the outer edge of the image. And that isn't as successful as when the image is full screen and really is used more like video. Now the next one here is a really great example of where it's a large image and he pans across different parts of the image, showing different emphasis. Now the quality is pretty bad, but I think you get the right idea from it. The simplest version of this is where you have an image and you either zoom into it or you zoom out of it in order to show something of detail. Here's where we're shifting the view from one actor to another. And then here's another one where we're kind of starting from here and we're zooming into this area of interest up in the mountains. Looks like it's somewhere in the Rockies or something like that. So this Ken Burns effect is pretty easy to do in Premiere. So I can close my bin here because I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to go to the very first item and I'm going to double click on it, or sometimes you have to triple click. And what I'm trying to do is click until I see this little blue icon. And what that lets me know is that that particular item is selected. Now over in the effects controls, we're going to come up here and take a look at this motion window. Now here is the current timeline of that particular item. If we go to the very end, you'll see we actually see the next video. So if we click on the left arrow one time, then we'll get to the last frame of that outgoing video, which is very important. So I know with this particular thing, I'm going to actually zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to zoom out here. And maybe what I'll do is actually, I think I'm going to zoom in. I think the way that I want this to happen is that I have the large chicken first, and then I'm going to go back to the beginning of this. I'm going to hit a scale and a position, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit, go out there in time. I'm going to zoom out. Let me get to about there, maybe a little bit more. You'll see that it's really helpful to have fairly large images. So that works out pretty well. So now what I've got is basically a move going from the chicken back to that. And it's so I can reveal this space where I might put some graphics. Now, if I were to just watch this by going back to the beginning and then pressing the space bar, you'll see that it happens pretty quickly. It kind of abruptly hits. Now, one of the ways that we can smooth this is by selecting those keyframes and choosing the correct temporal interpolation. Now, the two that we will use the most are called ease in and ease out. So what I'm going to do is ease this in, and the reason we do that is so that it makes that so it kind of stops a little bit slower. Let me try it the other way. Ease out. I always forget which one to use. Well, it's moving fast enough that we can't really tell too much exactly what's going on, but it has smoothed that out a little bit, so it's not quite so abrupt. Now what I'm going to do is jump to the next one. So there's the cat. I'm going to I'm going to click on the effects controls. I'm going to click on that until I get the blue icon in the middle, and now what I can do is, let's say that he is zooming in. I'm going to zoom into him because the last one was zoomed out. So there, I'll go back to the beginning of this, hit position and scale, and then I'm going to zoom in by grabbing that. Move him kind of to the center-ish there. Now what I can do is select these, interpolation, ease in. I'll be talking about how he's looking at the chickens, noticing he might get a meal. Notice that I don't have this to go all the way because I want that to kind of help tell the story where the image zooms up and then stays there so that it has a chance to really register. In the next one here, I'm going to go kind of the opposite. So there we go. Got to click on it until you kind of have it selected. So I'm going to start off with the chicken kind of large. Go back to the beginning of it. And I'm going to zoom out. There we go. And then I'm going to do my ease in. Alright, so that's helping tell our story, I think. If we go back to the beginning, this is what we have. Okay, now, let's take a look at this one. It's not always necessary for us to begin just at the very beginning of this. Maybe it'd be better for these to be moved a little bit in. So I'm going to move those back a little bit. And with these first two, I'm going to go ahead and select them and change those to ease out. So here we've got, if I go back just a little bit, he's sitting there, then we see him, and then we zoom in, and then he stops. So just a little bit more storytelling when we can see it just a little bit longer before we zoom into it. Now obviously, if we're doing like beautiful pictures of flowers and everything else, we might want things zooming, a little bit slowly all the time, so everything is moving just a little bit here and there. And we can control how fast the moves are by how close these keyframes are from each other, as well as how long these clips are. Now, these particular clips are only 5 seconds each, but if I wanted to extend one of them out for some reason, I can easily do that with the right set of tools. Now, one way to do it is manually, where maybe I select some of these and move them back a little bit, and then I can extend this out when I need to, and then I can move these back with something like the ripple delete. That's a manual way of doing it. I've just extended that particular image for some reason I want to talk about it, I guess, in something. I can also use the right tools in here. There is a rolling edit tool, there's a ripple edit tool, and the ripple edit tool is a really successful one because it basically does that exact thing. It allows you to add time to a clip or take away time from a clip, which is really, really great. And what it does is it ripples along the entire timeline. So you might want to play with some of the tools here, especially the ripple edit tool, just to see what it does, because it's a very effective tool for this type of editing. Anyway, I've got that next keyframe there, and let's say that I'm going to change from one cat to the other right here. So I'm going to just change that so I can see that cat clearly. Let me go to the next cat. That one there. It's got to be just a little bit zoomed out, so I'm not going to worry about doing the Ken Burns effect right now. But the reason I'm doing this is to show I've got two cats that are looking at it. And this is a little abrupt in between. So instead what I'm going to do is use a transition in between. So if I go to Effects, I can go to Video Transitions and Dissolve. And the only one I really want to see you guys use is what's called Cross Dissolve. And this is a really simple transition that will actually transition from one cat to the other. And that's a really good way of making something happen that's less abrupt. Now, where this can get a little bit funky is I'm going to undo that real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and now use my Ken Burns effect. And so I'm going to do a position here and a scale. Always do that. Let's say I'm going to have him here, and a little bit later I'm going to zoom up a little bit. So it's going to be subtle. It doesn't have to be a lot of zoom, just a little bit in this case. Ooh, his eyes probably should stay about the same place. So let's move his eyes down a little bit, his eyes up a little bit. So very subtle move there. Ease in. And let's go to the last one here. Oops, I keep on wanting to double click on the image. There we go. Now I've got him. He's going to be there in his motion, position, and scale. Oops, let me scale that back a little bit. Just click and drag on that. So he's going to zoom in just a little bit. That looks pretty good. Let's make those interpolation, have ease in. So if we were to watch from here, this is what we have. Zooms up a little bit. Zooms up a little bit. That one kind of moves a little bit more than I'd probably want. That works. Now, I want to do that transition between them again. So I'm going to get my mouse right in between the two. And one thing to note is that this one is actually what's called the default transition. So you can right click and set it as the default. And I think it's just Control D or Control Shift D. I always forget. Should know. Control D? Yeah, Control D. And the Control D applies the default transition. So let's take a look real quick. Now what I'd really like is that animation is that when it moves, I'd like it to already be moving. So I'm going to go back and look at this, and let's see real quick at that particular item. You'll notice that I've got these keyframes that were at the beginning, but the transition actually happens for an additional 15 frames before. So sometimes when you use transitions after you've created the Ken Burns effect, you actually have to drag back your keyframes in order to have it happen throughout that entire transition. Just like that. Alright, so a little bit better there. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is look at doing a little bit of graphics on this thing. So I know that at the beginning of this, I'd like some sort of like title or graphics. There are two basic ways to do this. One way of doing this would be creating the graphics right in Premiere itself. So if I click on a new item, I can do a title, and the title will come up, and I can go ahead and say this will be the title, title opening. Beautiful. So I've got my opening here, and I'm going to call this Crazy Cat's Cat Attack. Now what I can do is I can adjust all of my different settings here. I can go ahead and change the colors here and the fonts here. There are some styles that are already there, which could be kind of fun. These, of course, are maybe not perfect, but I'm just trying to play with this. Let's see, aspect ratio. Yeah. I'm going to change that back a little bit. Just kind of put that where I think it would fit well on this video. And then I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now, with that title, you'll notice I haven't actually used it yet. If I double click on it, I can edit it, and then I have to close that title. And when I'm ready to use it, it actually should go up on a frame or on a track that is above the video. And once it's there, you'll see it actually comes up. Beautiful. Now, since I don't want it to come in until later, I might go ahead and adjust, figure out when it comes in. Boom, it's going to come in right after that, so I'm going to move it there. And I'm going to actually have it overlap just a little bit into the next thing. That's actually pretty clever. Not perfect, but who cares? Now I'm going to go to the beginning of it, and with that Control D, I'm going to apply that transition where it fades in and fades out. So that Control D is the same thing as me going to the effects and then actually dragging it to the end. So it does the same thing. Now there are other effects, of course, to definitely play with. There are things like film dissolves and all sorts of things, and these can be kind of fun because you can do some really neat things with different things like dip to white and dip to black. Maybe not as effective on titles like this, but you kind of get the idea, I think. Alright, so let's say that we've just done that. We've got our cat attack. Now, one way of doing this as well is actually going to Photoshop. If I were to do this instead, I might create a new custom film and video, and I want to make sure that I'm using the 720p setting. And I think that's everything that I need. It says it's on white right now, but we can certainly turn that off if we don't want it there. So let me make a new layer, and then I can turn off that background. And here I have a little bit more control. So if I wanted to do cat and then attack as a different thing, let's see, that's going to be red and it's going to be big. So let's see what's a really nice bold font that we can use. Who cares? I'm just going to take something big. Cat attack. Boom. And the first one will be cat. So that font that we just used was Agency Bold. Problem right now, of course, is being a little bit of a pain. Control T. There we go. And we've got our cat attack. Now, of course, we can't see what our background is going to be here. So if I did want to see what that might look like, here's what I've kind of got now as my cat attack. And my background is just black, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and save this Photoshop document, and I'm going to save it in the right proper spot. So it's going to be in my Audition CC Toot. This is the Premiere Pro CC Toot in the footage here. And I'm going to make a new one called Graphics. And this is going to be my title, Cat Attack. Now the reason that I've done this as a Photoshop document is that I want to import this particular Photoshop document itself. So I'll go to Import, and I'll find that particular file and double click on it. Now when it comes in, it'll come in as a couple different options. I can actually bring this in as all the layers merged, or as individual layers, or as what's called a sequence. And the sequence can be really kind of cool too, because what that does is that gives me my own folder with the different layers that are inside there and a new sequence. I'm going to drag that sequence back out. And the reason I have this sequence is because now it shows me all the different layers that are there right on top of each other. The black right here, I'm going to go ahead and take that back a little bit, and then I'm going to make the cat title a little bit further out and the attack a little bit further out. So here's what happens. Cat attack. And then the black will kind of disappear here. What I'm going to do is add that effect here. So I'm going to do Control D. I'm going to go to the beginning of that one and Control D. Beginning of that. Control D. So here's what we've got going on. Cat attack. Hopefully that black will actually be fading out at that point. And then I'm going to have those go to the end, and I'm going to do my Control D there to apply the cross dissolve. And that's only about 5 seconds long, so it's not super long. I might go ahead and make that a little bit longer, just because I think it's a little bit longer on the thing. Now I'm going to come back to this particular item, and I'm going to delete that original cat attack, and I'm going to drag that comp right above. And you'll see here, now what I get is the black cat attack. And then it fades out. So that actually works out really well. Let me see what happens if I just put it right there. Boom. So that comp actually is a little bit long. So I'm going to move that back just a little bit. It seems like that's not just right. Let's see. Okay, beautiful. This right here definitely needs that transition in between. So let's do that cat attack. Beautiful. Now notice this thing, it's a little bit funky because I changed the length of the comp that I had there. We get these like little lines in here, and it lets me know that that's been changed. So I'm just going to take it back and then zoom forward, or take it out a little bit. So I take it back and then take it forward again, and it kind of fixes that problem so we don't kind of see that. So there's a real simple way of creating some sort of sequence that would be used as, and Photoshop graphic that could be used as a title instead. Now that we have pretty much everything done except for some sort of voiceover, and by the way, you can actually record your voiceover right in Premiere itself. To do that, definitely look it up. The other way, of course, is doing it in Audition or some other sort of software, and then bringing it in and editing it on the different timelines as needed. You'll notice this right here, by the way, has where the audio was linked from the original comp. You can actually right-click and unlink these if you want to be able to remove that bogus audio timeline. So all you get is that particular video from the original title composition that we made. Oh, I did forget one other thing. The last thing that we might want to do is create some sort of title at the very, very end. Let's see, this thing is really, really long. So I'm going to come out to basically where this ends, and I'm going to go ahead and stop my video here. And the Control K will actually make an edit point, which allows me to cut at that point. It's the same thing as going to the razor tool and just clicking somewhere. Anyway, I'm going to drag that out just a little bit longer. Reason why is because I'm going to have my quick title happen during that time, and at the end of it, I'm going to go ahead and fade out. Oh, by the way, I guess the crossfade is the same default for video and audio. So I think that's Control-Shift-D. Yep, Control-Shift-D allows me to add that. And that means that I now have that quick thing on there. And then, if you want to be able to make that a little bit longer, you can just move over until I can actually see it. Then you can actually click and drag it out if you want it to happen longer. So now it's going to fade out over that entire length of time. So that's a really effective way of doing it. Alright, now that I'm ready with my timeline, I'm going to go ahead and create my other title, which is going to be my ending credits. So I'm going to do a new item, and we're going to do a new title, and this is going to be called Ending Credits. And I will say starring Theo. Actually, it starts off with Vincent. And that was as himself. That was one cat. And the other one is Vincent as himself. and chickens. And then I'll have a little message here at the end. By the way, now you'll notice I can't even see all that text, and the reason why is because it's actually lower than what we've got. So we can start to move this around, or one really quick cool thing that we can do is click on the crawl and roll options. And I'm going to go ahead and roll this so that it basically rolls. Let's start off screen and end off screen. And so now what I have the ability to do is kind of scroll up and down, and that's because that's the way it's going to actually happen when I watch this, which is really good. This is not the best font in the world. I don't actually see what would be the best font very quickly, at least. Be nice if we had a quicker, easier way. Rockwell. That's a nicer one. I like that particular font. Alright, so let's make that a little bit smaller. And chickens. These are going to be a little bit smaller. And then I'll say no chickens were harmed in the making of this film. And of course, that needs to be smaller. And maybe a little bit more space between that one. Let's go after, make sure that there's no extra space there. So there we've got starring at the top, Vincent, Theo. Now, the other things that you might put in here is where you got your images from. And I'd say, you know, images, copyright of images, Jonathan Ross. Those are my images. Let's see, those were, I don't even know what I made those. So that was 59. So I want that to be the same, 59. Not the best choice for size, but kind of get the point. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close that. And to apply this, I'll just add this to the end here. And it's 5 seconds just like the other ones, and you'll see it's moving. And it's moving a little bit fast, so I want it to extend to the end. All I have to do is drag it out, and what it will do is now it will go at that new speed. And I think that is now finally it. We have now completed our particular video. And last thing that we have to do is export it. So I'm going to go to the export media, choose that, and make sure that you're in the timeline that you want to export. If you want to check, you can make sure that you have the right time in here, and it's going to be the sequence in and out. You can use entire sequence. If you have any video or audio that is beyond the timeline, then that entire sequence will automatically include all of that. So just be aware that you want to make sure that you're basically doing the sequence in to out, which is the area that you have actually done your edit there. And then when we choose our format, we're going to use H.264. And if we start to look at all the different options here, it gets really, really crazy. There are so many different options here. Basically, I'm going to go ahead and match the source, but use a medium bit rate. That is, so I don't have a gigumongous file. The next thing that we want to choose is where these are going to go. So let me make sure that I'm exporting them to the correct place. And that is going to be the same folder. I'm going to hit save. Now, some of the settings that we have in here that we could change if we really wanted to would be what our video settings are. There are two basic ways of doing your bit rate. One is called constant bit rate, and that does the same bit rate throughout. And then the other one is variable bit rate. This one says 1 pass, but 2 pass is usually a better way to go. If you want, you could change these to something like 2 and 4. And if we were to do that, then what we would actually be doing is changing our estimated file size to make it a lot smaller if we were doing that. With our audio settings, we could also change what our bit rate was if I wanted to make that different, it'd be possible. It's not really changing much about our image size because this is only a 50-second video anyway. Anyway, even if you just basically use the medium bit rate, that's good. You'll see this thing is 19 megs versus the 13 megs that we kind of adjusted it to, but just be aware that any of these settings that you change, of course, are dealing with your audio and your video settings and how those are going to work. One other thing in here that's kind of interesting is called the multiplexer, and what that does is that combines your audio and video into a type of file, and in this case it's going to be an MPEG-4 file. So pretty good. If you hit none, what it would do is actually save out separate files. And then let's see, this one's going to be setting it up for an iPod to be able to play. So I'm going to go back and just choose the medium bitrate one last time and go ahead and either queue or export. If I hit queue, it will open up Adobe Media Encoder and start to encode, or if I just use export, it will immediately start to export this video. And so now what it's going to do is go ahead and encode that. It's encoding it really, really fast on this computer, which is awesome. When that's done, now I should be able to go to that project folder and see that edit that I just made. And there it is. Now it obviously is not awesome, and that's because of the bit rate that we have. If you want to play around with things, you can try and adjust, use different settings. If I go to Media and you go to some of the different settings here, if you're using 720p's, those are good. If you go smaller than that, look for the ones that say 480p. The ones that are like 960 by 540, that works pretty well. Also, let's go ahead and export it that way. So this one's going to do a 2-pass encoding. And a 2-pass encoding, even though it's a smaller file, will typically give me a better quality. So as long as you are 720p and below, I'll be pretty cool. The 960 by 540 is a really nice size just because of the fact that it is smaller than 720p. It gives you a smaller file. But whoa, that's really not very good looking at all. So this is one of the things that you just have to work with all the time, is trying to figure out what is the right setting for you to output your thing. I'd say the medium quality should do pretty well, but we'll just have to see how it goes for the quality settings. As long as your file is under 50 megs, then I think we should be good. Anyway, that concludes this introduction to Premiere Pro and using the Ken Burns effect and all that kind of thing. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.